My name is Wenderson De Lima. I am a doctoral researcher at the business school in Stockholm.
What is the topic of your dissertation?
The topic of my dissertation is humanitarian innovations and entrepreneurship in developing countries, and I'm assessing a little bit of the innovations that are being developed in Europe and Stockholm, and I'm kind of following them from development to implementation in developing countries.
What are the most relevant questions you would like to address?
There is a growth of technologies for helping people, and we want to know how these technologies are perceived by both those who develop them and those who receive them. I mean, usually in the media, what you hear is the interpretation of those who develop, the interpretation of the entrepreneurs, but we want to hear as well the accounts coming from people who at the receiving end of those technologies. So that's what my research is dealing with,
What is the peculiarity of this sector?
In a market, in societies where the market is the main provider, you have as a consumer, you have a vote and you have a voice. Every time you buy a product, you have your vote and your voice heard when you purchase that product. And when you're dealing with people receiving humanitarian innovations, that relation between consumer and a business, it's kind of fragmented by people who fund those products, having in mind that many of the consumers cannot really, out of their pockets, pay for those products. Then you have a third part actually paying for those products, and this is a relation that's more complicated than actually consumer and business relation.
What do you think we should change in this relationship?
I think it's easier said than done, but I think that we should, when I say we, I talk about people coming from this part of the world. We should question our taking for granted assumptions about what people need. You should try to create new lenses to try to understand the people you're trying to help. I think that we should give a lot more attention to what's going on in a local context, because that's there is a big risk that we are losing that. You are losing the connection to what people on the ground in the local context are really trying to do with their lives.
How could we do it?
I think, first of all, is that we could create spaces where people can actually feel, people that are being helped, they can feel they can openly talk about what they need. Because if you do not create a space where people can actually tell you what they want, what they need, then from the beginning, you may create a product that is useless for them. And I in the quality of ex slum dweller, I understand, you know, how difficult it may feel to actually openly talk about your needs to people coming from outside. And there is a big that's a big obstacle to helping people, because we tend, people like me who lived in these areas, favelas, usually tend to assume that no one will ever understand us. So therefore you kind of do not share much of your reality to people who do not face the same problems, you know. So that's also a big issue. And also, of course, now I'm generalizing, but a lot of people face the problem of not feeling safe to tell what they want, you know, to not feel not only heard, but they feel like, I will tell what I want, but who's gonna care about that, you know? And that's something I think is a consequence of a structural discrimination of the people living in these areas. So,
what should we pay more attention to, in your opinion?
I think what we should pay attention to is what exactly people in these areas, people living in areas where poverty is extreme, what they say about their own solutions, what is that they want. Because there is, it's not new. In the aid industry, everybody knows that because these people, they do not finance their own products, they tend to lose voice when NGOs design the help they give for people like in that situation. And I think the biggest challenge is actually getting access to the stories of the people who are, to some extent, receiving help in these countries, in developing countries. You have to be able to see your attempts to help other people as a process of as a learning process, not as a one size fits all. But also we should be careful to not, exaggerate the ability of innovations to help people, because there is a lot of political issues that have to be addressed as well. We should not forget why people are in need. We should not actually forget about the political aspects of each and every problem we are trying to address, and they are all around them. You see that with the refugees now, all kinds of the slum, people living in slums as well. How are supposed to address these issues without touching upon political issues?
How was your personal experience? What do you remember of your childhood?
I think that what I see during my time as a child, I don't know if you remember what was going on in the 80s, the 90s in Brazil. The 80s, we probably here in Europe, you've seen on the news how Brazilian kids living on the streets were being shot by death squads and so on. You have that type of problems going on in Brazil. And for me, it was, we had a single but big NGO around, close to where I lived, close to the favela where I lived. And I remember that one of the biggest things during that time was the notion of a cultural identity. It was very important to be an exotic Brazilian at the time. You know, I'm very thankful because that NGO was the reason why I was fed. I could find food for a while. You know, that NGO does not exist anymore. But I remember that me and my brothers went to their office many times because they had courses about, Brazilian music, all of that, Afro-Brazilian identity. And it was on the agenda at the moment. And but I remember that I had, both me and my brothers, we had loads of fun playing Brazilian instruments, playing Brazilian music, but at the end of the day, we were there because of the food they served, not really because it wasn't really because of the so-called Brazilianness or the Afro-Brazilian identity. I understand that it may sound a little bit provocative for many people who think that they have the right to be authentic and so on, but I always saw that as something secondary. You have your basic needs. When you live in poverty, you pay attention to your basic needs more than your identity. You think of your identity when in the state I am now, I have food in the fridge, so I have time, I have the resources to think about my Afro-Brazilian identity.
How did you get from a slum in Brazil to a university in Sweden?
Yeah, that's a big question, and the first thing is that I received help, as I say, for a long time. It wasn't something I received once and then I have built a huge empire of wealth around it, and that's what I'm trying to. I usually say, I usually tell people is that I received help from the Catholic Church, specifically from a nun in the Catholic Church in close to where I lived. She was well educated and she helped me a lot with school and stuff, and that help was absolutely crucial. I can tell you, I devote a lot of what I have done so far to the people who helped me, and not only because they helped me, but because they gave me a voice, and that's something not a lot of people did.
What is the society you dream of?
I think that equality really should be on the table all the time when we talk about the way a society should look like. And I still do not know where to look when I talk about equality. But I hope that there will be more collective thinking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.